Welcome to our YouTube video series on incorporation law. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal, and in this particular video we'll be discussing the particulars of a holding company. So what exactly is a holding company? Well, a holding company from a legal creation standpoint is no different from any other company. It is merely a process of how it's applied and utilized which differentiates it. But fundamentally, a holding company is the same as any other company. But what you do with a holding company, which is not operate a business, but instead hold assets, hold investments, hold shares, is what's critical to understanding how a holding company functions and the purposes behind it. So one of the primary purposes of a holding company is asset protection, specifically transferring out of the operating company assets and holding it in a corporate structure independent of an operating company. Whether that operating company is something that you own a majority stake in or a minority stake in, and also as distinct from yourself individually, such that the aim is to separate it and protect it from creditors and other parties that might go after the assets within the the operating company, or they might go after if you were holding it in your personal capacity. The next aspect is that holding companies can assist in facilitating your claims for lifetime capital gains exemption. Now, there are very particular nuances associated with the lifetime capital gains exemption, such that structuring it might not be best done within an operating company, in large part because an operating company often has many other party obligations to deal with, whether it's other shareholders, investors, creditors, financiers, that you want to be able to modify, deal with the share structures, and be able to optimize your use of the lifetime capital gains exemption when opportunities become available to yourself. Now, that is something that you need to discuss with your lawyer and your accountant so as to properly structure stuff, and when the time comes to capitalize on one's lifetime capital gains exemption numbers, you need to plan in advance as to how you're going to structure any deals or any withdrawals to optimize it. Another feature of a holding company is that it can facilitate tax savings or at a minimum tax deferral. Now, when you draw out money from a corporation into as a dividend to yourself personally, you are then exposed to the personal income tax rate. With a holding company, you're only subject to a corporate transference, and as the corporate tax has potentially already been paid or is paid on this process, and this is a lower rate, you have more capital with which to utilize. Now, part of the issue is that when you have the same class of shares as another shareholder, and that other shareholder is needing to draw out money by way of dividends, he cannot be dividended out without yourself being dividended out, such that he takes out his money subject to a personal tax rate, and you would then be subject to it and then attempt to transpose it for investment purposes or hold on to it. Not necessarily the best strategy. Instead, an intra-corporate transfer, there you would not be subjecting yourself to the personal income tax rate, and instead you can either hold the funds, reinvest the funds, or apply them for business purposes, such that you're having more money, given the fact that you haven't paid personal tax on it, to invest and to create even further money. This is the advantage of a holding company from the tax savings, tax deferral angle. Now, what are we also looking at? Estate planning, succession planning. Once you have your shares of your operating company in a holding company, you may well bring in other individuals, namely family members, to hold on to those shares and succession out your ownership in that company. Naturally, this is going to be subject to, oftentimes, to a unanimous shareholders agreement, and you may well be required to continue to retain control. Nevertheless, it allows the process to move forward and allows you to do effective estate planning and succession planning, hence the further value associated with having a holding company. Now, what it does not do is it does not provide you with an opportunity to duplicate these advantages. Simply because you have multiple companies, you do not get multiple lifetime capital gains exemptions. Instead, you only have the one, and you are using it to structure various aspects. As well, you have the administrative burden and the costs associated with both creating it and operating it. And you could have obligations on the tax side with respect to paying taxes associated with the holding company. But depending on how you're structuring it, the additional tax that you might pay might be offset by the tax savings that you on the personal side and the tax deferrals that you're able to achieve. So holding companies do have very specific advantages, even though they are simply a standardized company utilized for distinct purposes other than operating an active business. Thank you.